Alrighty, I believe we are recording now. So welcome everyone to the second webinar of the 2022 Volunteer Engagement Series. My name is Sydney Shuttro and I'm the Director of Volunteer Engagement at the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. Before we get started, I do have my kind of typical disclaimer that I like to do before these webinars. So the webinar is being recorded, so please be sure to keep information confidential when we talk about our volunteers, clients, partners in the community, you know, generalizations, no specific names, things of that nature. Please remember to mute yourself to reduce the background noise out of respect for our speaker. If I hear noise, I'll do my best to mute you as quickly as possible. Not trying to be mean, just trying to be courteous. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box and I'll send a little message in the chat box telling everyone good morning so that way people can kind of find that easier. There'll also be time at the end of the session to ask questions as well. So you'll be able to do those verbally as well as type those into the chat box. Also, remember that everything we talk about in these webinars is not required to implement into your programs. These are simply best practices through research and personal experience. But if you do like what you hear and want to implement any of these suggestions or strategies, please be sure to have the support of your supervisor or management before moving forward. And I'll also have a couple updates to share with everyone after the main presentation, so please stick around if you can. And I want to kick this off by thanking everyone again for your support in this ongoing training opportunity. This is something I love to do. I'm super excited this year that we have some amazing and dynamic guest speakers. This month, case in point, we have Susan Sano from Volunteer Fairfax to talk to us about working with volunteers of every generation. I'm going to let Susan tell you a little bit more about herself, but this topic in particular, I've dabbled in myself and got a little sneak peek of what Susan's about to talk to us about, so I'm super excited. So Susan, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge, expertise, and experience with us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sydney. I love working with volunteer managers. That's pretty much what I have built the past 10 years on, and certainly through the pandemic, my world has changed quite a bit in what I've been doing, and I absolutely adore devoting my time to training and thinking about others and thinking about how we can best serve volunteer managers, because I think that's the strongest way to serve volunteers is to become more professional in what we do. I am Susan Sano. I am a CVA. Yay, recommended highly. And I've been working in nonprofit management for my entire career. And we'll just say that it's been about 25 years. The number is actually much more, but we won't go there. The past 10 years or 12 years, I've been with Volunteer Fairfax. I started out as a board member. They needed an extra set of hands for the summer, so I did this big uh, resignation. And the truth is, I never went back and have been on staff ever since. So that's how I got there. So my background is in both nonprofit management and volunteer management. So today what we're going to do is look at some statistics, because I always like to start at the very base, know what we're working in. We're going to look at the generations defined, look at that volunteer manager cycle, or the management cycle, as well as doing some scenarios when we put it all together. So I don't know if you've seen these kinds of numbers before, but it's always great to know where the strength of volunteering is in the state. There is a source, a link on this slide, and I will be sharing the slides with Sydney, and she'll figure out how to get them to people if you need them. But there is a source of statistics by state. So if you work in other states or just curious, what's it like versus your hometown versus the community that you work in now, or just the strength in Tennessee, but to understand that you are having 1.7 million volunteers contribute approximately 137.7 million hours of service. 31% of your residents volunteer, so you're around the middle, a little bit lower than the middle number when you compare to the rest of the country. But volunteer service is worth $3.3 billion, again, just in Tennessee. 49%, or let's say 50%, do favors for neighbors, and I think that's a significant number in during the pandemic. How did that work out? I don't know when these stats were timed, but I don't think that that includes the pandemic years. I know a lot of data collection has been a little messed up with the pandemic. Uh, 20% of residents do something positive for their neighborhood. Again, very significant during the pandemic. And then just under 30% of residents are participating in local groups or organizations. And then if you've never looked at volunteering with an hourly rate, uh, independent sector does tracks this rate annually, and again by state. So the rate right now in Tennessee is $24.52 an hour. So if you've ever wondered how much impact your volunteers are giving your organization, you can take the number of volunteers, the number of hours, multiply it by $24.52, and you'll get a fascinating number and certainly something to talk about amongst the volunteers, amongst your staff, your board, and your community. I also am sharing the link about older adults volunteering if you're interested in that, and you may be. There's a lot of data on this other site. They're called for a lot of number crunching, and so I just want to throw that out to you if you're looking for those kinds of statistics. So let's get into it about working with volunteers of every generation. So what is a generation? Just making sure that we have across the board same definition. So the generation is an identifiable group that shares birth years, age, location, significant events at critical development. Never has that last line been so important. Significant events at critical development. Because I believe the term what happened to you during the pandemic is going to last generations, because we're going to look back on this quite a bit. Were you in school? Were you out of school? Were you working? Were you not working? It's really going to impact quite a bit. And we don't even know that yet, but it's just my gut feeling, and others too. So let's look at the generations defined. And I think the message that I want to send to you is when we're talking about different generations, we can put names on them and they get slapped with names very easily. They even get defined by years, but it's always important to see what are their current ages. I mean, we still may be whining that millennials want a trophy for every soccer game that they go to. But the truth is, they're not there anymore. They're, starting families, are in professions, are, at a different part of their life cycle. So I always like to look at the generations as well as what the current age is. And this is based on 2022. So no, not everybody has had their birthday yet, and we're still early in the year, but you get a sense of idea that when you are stereotyping and throwing people into this group, that you're really got to make sure that we're talking about where they are today. Generations also can span enough time that the difference between looking at Gen Z, between a 12-year-old and a 27-year-old, is hugely different in what they're looking for in life. So it's not always good to go with that generational title, because the span is a little bit too large. Whereas Gen X, everybody's between 42 and 57, and there's a lot more similarities. So I'm sure everybody is looking at this and found their own generation. That's what you usually do when you look at these kinds of things. Important to note, and I think we do know this, but it's all these generations are now working and volunteering together. So it's really a wide span. So it's always good to see where you are in the generational mix and then where your volunteers tend to be. And they're not going to be all in one lane. When lifespans were into the late 60s, early 70s, year old, people's volunteering time did not last as long in retirement. And now we're talking about volunteering into their 80s or even 90s. Quite a difference. So using the chat area or unmute yourself, feel free to, let's talk a little bit about some of the Stereotypes of your own generation. I talked about millennials love to get trophies for anything. I'm cheating because I'm not a millennial. I'm a baby boomer, and I'm a late baby boomer, very late baby boomer. But to me, I was always told the baby boomers were going to solve everything. They were the biggest group and we had to deal with them so the problems would be solved. That's from my point of view. Sydney, are there any other players, people saying what some stereotypes of their own generation?
So I typed in, I'm a millennial. I feel like I'm a millennial or I'm a baby boomer in a millennial body. But I know one of the stereotypes I hear about my generation is instant gratification. Like we
Mhm.
want something right now. Kind of goes along with your trophy uh, example.
Exactly.
Useless. Someone's on the cusp of Gen X and millennials. Gen X get a rep for only worrying about themselves. As a millennial, all my money goes to avocado toast. I like that one.
And as a non-millennial, I've never had a piece of avocado toast in my life. Don't know what that would taste like.
I know one that I hear a lot about baby boomers is they know nothing about technology. Another, I believe, millennial, internet obsessed and lazy. Oh, Gen Z, internet obsessed and lazy. And she
Okay.
loves avocado toast. Gen Z, lazy and soft.
Uh,
Snowflake, we hear thrown around quite a bit. I think that's a
and snowflake is used so much. I know they're supposed to say you're fragile, but I don't know who they're describing anymore. I guess as a baby boomer, I can't quite remember. But let's look at some of the generational descriptors. I know there's a lot of language here, but the idea is to understand what the stereotypes are saying, as well as what we're thinking when we are either them personally or we are working with volunteers who are in another category than ourselves. So the traditionalists, the greatest generation, committed, competent, loyal volunteers. They tend to pick an organization or job and commit to it and stay with it for many years. Key, and we're going to talk about this for each category, how they like to be communicated. This is the group that likes to get a phone call, uh, write a letter, or talk to them in person. Baby boomers, I'm ambitious, I'm competent, I'm competitive. Um, they want to know that we're part of a bigger picture and making an impact on their work. Short-term specific assignments or opportunities to use their special skills. I like to be communicated through email or in person. Some people phone. I don't like that, but that's me. Gen X, adaptable, confident, self-starters, and very determined. They are technologically savvy. They have had technology in front of them their entire lives. They volunteer when they see a cause that impacts them directly, and they like to be communicated through email, text, and Facebook. Millennials, extremely technologically savvy. When in doubt, I'm going to call on a millennial and they'll help me. They're enthusiastic, fun, eager, crave personal attention and lots of praise. As volunteer managers, we need to know that. Um, like traditionalists, they volunteer because they believe it's their civic duty and want to make a difference. Many student volunteers are looking to gain professional experience, and they're living in the age of social media and comfortably communicate through Twitter, Instagram, or text. And the Gen Z, fascinated to know that these are people whose life events include 9/11, Obama presidency, Trump presidency, and the COVID pandemic. So it's really, I think, going to impact them a lot, as well as the next one. But this is a group that is independent, self-confident, autonomous. They don't rely on their parents as much as the previous teen generations did. They use the internet and technologies to start earning money at a much earlier age, and they like to be communicated through Instagram, TikTok, and I add something I've never heard of, because of the generational difference, I may not be up on the latest, and to acknowledge that, and that's something that's going to be important as we work with volunteers in talking to others in other generation for their guidance on if you're going to reach out to the Gen X or Gen Z group, what's that going to look like? I think the alphas are still defining. They're just 12 years old at this point, but again, it's that impact of COVID. And I'll mention this later again that alpha, you're really thinking about family volunteering, and you have to get through the parental gatekeeper because they're the ones who are controlling their worlds at this point. So we got some, we didn't get them all as far as descriptors, but to keep that in mind. So let's stereotype and whine about the other ones. Seniors, they're the ones who care about the broader community and the backbone of volunteer programs and service organizations. Young people are selfish and don't want to make commitments. Young people, they're the true activists of today. Older people may do nice, helpful things as volunteers, but cutting edge work for social change is being done mainly by the young. And then my little game of generational Jeopardy. A 2019 New York Times article says that this two-word phrase marks the end of friendly generational relations. Does anybody know what that question is? And you can put it in form of a question. Answer in the chat box.
We had an answer come in that says, okay, boomer.
You got it. That is correct. Okay, boomer, which was in my view, a condescending thing to say to somebody. Others interpret it as, okay, boomer, you go. And I think it was the nasty one. It was like, sit down and you've had your turn, be quiet. It's my generation's turn next. And as volunteer managers, we are saying every generation has something to give. We just need to know how to access it and find their hot buttons. But I'm just always fascinated by the OK Boomer line. So let's talk about the volunteer management cycle and how all of this impacts managing volunteers. So if you're familiar with the cycle, it just goes round and round and round and round. Thank goodness it goes round and round because that's what gives us our jobs year after year because we're always doing all these different steps. So the place to start is to ask, do your volunteers impact your strategic plan, the very base of an organization, the base of a program? What are you and what are your current volunteers? What do they look like by generation? At the beginning of the pandemic, the greatest shock to so many people was our 65 and older were not able to volunteer anymore. They weren't able to come into the office, or it was that very unusual situation where they felt comfortable or the adjustments that you had to make. But a lot of people lost their senior volunteers or lost all of their volunteers for every generation. Are you thinking about targeting generations as a recruitment priority? I've seen organizations that have said, look, we've lost the dependable retirees, and now we have to look at perhaps high school, college age, young professionals, whatever generation that you're looking at, are you targeting that? So then we have to start talking about how to reach these people. Great question. Strategic question is what percentage of your organization's work is even done by volunteers? And then from there, you break it down by generation and you'll see what kind of impact. Are you looking to integrate or segregate your volunteers by generation? Are you giving opportunities to meet other people who are of the same age? I want to hang out, in a program that goes from 10 to 1 on Tuesdays, and I get to see my final retirees. It's my new group of friends. Or are you looking at offering multi-generational volunteering opportunities? If you're looking at your volunteer program with a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, again, break it down by by generation and where do you need to build strengths, build leadership opportunities, and opportunities to serve and be welcoming. Volunteer recruitment. Words matter. I actually do a whole webinar just on words matter, writing your recruitment message. If you are one generation, but you're looking for a different generation to become new recruits, make sure that you let somebody of that other generation read your announcement, read your blurb that you're putting on Facebook or posting at your local college campus. The idea is you may not remember or know what the language is, and to get other voices. Test your message. You know, you can say meet new people is in one message, or meet new people and serve the seniors in your community, or work with people who are preparing to attend the Paralympics or something like that. You can see what's the hot button for people to come and volunteer at your organization. Think about the volunteering calendar. I always say that we're very lucky. We have 2 starts of a year. One is in January, new calendar year, new resolutions, and then September, which is the beginning of the school year. Again, what kind of volunteers you're looking for and what kind of influence the time of the year can have. When you're screening for volunteers, you know, asking about what their preferences, what they're looking for, will you need to go through background checks or other training requirements? How long does it take to go from interest, inquiry to actual volunteering? For some groups, it's a very quick, you know, we'll talk to you on Thursday and you can start on Saturday. And those that have more extensive um, uh, training opportunity or required training programs. It may take 6 months to go through the process, or I am a usher at a local theater here in Northern Virginia, and I can tell you when I inquired, I said I'm ready to usher, and it was a popular gig, and it took me 3 years to become an usher, but I did it and waited for it, and it's been great. And then what kind of communications are you talking to your volunteers? What is it by choice of generation? Phone could work, US mail could work, email, text, Instagram, or something I've never heard of. I have a daughter who is 24, and if she got a phone call, she would freak out. She does. I find that generation, and I do worry about this, they don't know phone etiquette, phone skills, and they're much more text and email savvy. So looking at volunteer recruitment by generation, the traditionalists, these are people over 70, I think. You know, you're looking to offer a daytime orientation. They're looking for safety, someplace that's easy to park. Set after morning or afternoon rush hour. They are more likely to see things in a newspaper announcement, phone tree, if you have any kind of communications vehicle for the senior community, they'd more likely to see that. Baby boomers, they have the leadership skills, and as they move into retirement or in their first 10 years of retirement, they're certainly not slowing down. A daytime orientation could work, evening could as well. Again, the parking options, they sometimes can dovetail with their evening plans. If they're going to put you in a new part of town or a different part of town, they may be able to come to your training at 5 and then meet friends for dinner at 6:30. More likely to react to email and Facebook. Generation X, this is the one with the current highest volunteerism rate. They're comfortable with family volunteering. They probably volunteered through school with the requirements in education now. They are prime in their career, and they have also had extensive exposure to technology. So a before or after work orientation or recruitment time. They can offer alternative participation, you need to be sensitive to the school calendar. They probably wouldn't be as available during the summer if their kids are out of school, but stress the leadership opportunities and like to be talked to with email and Facebook. Millennials, they've had the lifelong exposure to technology and volunteering. So again, that before, after work, offer alternative e-participation, sensitive to school calendars as well, but they're really interested in career growth impact. And sometimes it's that volunteering leadership opportunities will let them move to the next level at work as well. The Gen Z is pretty undefined. Remember, that's I think the 13 to 27, and they're making their way as adults. Recent articles, much to my surprise, are saying this is the group with the lowest volunteering rate, but I think because they have other priorities. And that you have to realize these are kids who were born during the 9/11 period, and now that they're becoming adults in the pandemic. And I can tell you my daughter's been home for a couple years, still waiting for that big break. But these are people seeking opportunities to shine on college applications or first job opportunities, looking for things before or after school. If you call for a meeting at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, they're not going to be there. They're still in school. Evenings might be good. Weekends might be good. Access to transportation might be an issue, and they may need to get their parents' approval, especially if they're on the younger side. But best way to talk to them is the text, Instagram, TikTok, and something I've never heard of. And then alpha generation, this is the 0 to 12s. They're part of that family volunteering, and you really have to get through the gatekeeper parent. So while they will eventually move to probably the Instagram and TikTok, you're going to reach out to them via other generations, maybe email and Facebook. But you got to keep looking at that mix of what you're needing and what you when you have your opportunities. So in your volunteer orientation, know what makes an assignment appealing. Years ago, I talked to somebody who called me and said, I'm looking for a volunteer. It is the most boring thing, but I have to find a volunteer. I just don't have enough time in the day, and I'm really sorry to have to bring somebody in, but it's really, really boring. Well, I got to talk to her a little bit more, and what the assignment was to call radio stations and promote Rock the Vote. It was in the early days of the MTV program, MTV Push. And I thought, you're somebody who comes from a different world. If I got a communications major in the local college whose dream is to work in radio, for them to call radio stations all day was a dream opportunity. So what makes an assignment appealing may not be right for you and your where you are in your generation, but think of who this is going to be an awesome opportunity. Days of the week, time of day, who's welcome, who's not, who is available, who is not. A retiree, you don't want to assume that they're going to show up at 8 a.m., but you offer a start time of 8 a.m., 10 a.m., or 1 p.m., and that might be an opportunity uh, to offer orientations at an appropriate time. With virtual trainings now available, becoming more regular. Think about if you can do some virtual or continue to do virtual even as you move to more in person. Um, the webinar platforms, webinar, Meetup, Skype, FaceTime, Google Hangout, or again, something I've never heard of. It seems that new ones come along all the time. And it's like, I can meet you any place. I just need to know what platform I'm going to. If you offer orientations, it can be either participatory, meet as a group, or self-paced. Remember that retiree may be interested in the participatory, either come online or come to actually meet face to face. Whereas a busy career person, they don't have time to leave their office in the middle of the day. If there's written or verbal instructions available, if you're taping things and people can download and look on their schedule, at their convenience. If you are bringing people in, one of my best practice tips is to go through the orientation, but also provide some kind of service opportunity. We're going to talk for half an hour and then we're going to power pack lunches to give to the feeding program, and it gets people even more engaged, and they're already giving something to your organization. Let them go through that experience. Be very specific on your additional required training. Again, that how long does it take to go from inquiry to actually becoming a volunteer? And then allow for that networking and social time. And that's pretty much for every generation. High schoolers want to meet other high schoolers, college kids want to meet other college kids, et cetera. Let me just stop for a moment if there's any questions, anything outstanding, Sydney?
No questions have come in. We have a Gen Zer who loves to make calls, write letters, and writes checks. So I
So,
thought that was fun.
So I'm going to just tell you how this story ends of this webinar. And the story that I always will say is listen to your individual volunteers, because there's always somebody who's going to break out of the stereotype. And that's why it's so dangerous to hover on the stereotypes. When people say everybody over 50 doesn't know anything about technology, this is when I question, it's like, wait a minute, how long have computers been in the workplace? And the answer is, I think it's about 40 years. I've worked with computers for as long as I've been working. So even if I'm over that mark and say that I'm old and I don't know anything about technology. Nope. I have not dealt with, I mean, I have dealt with technology my entire career. So going to stereotypes is always dangerous. So let's get back into the volunteer management cycle. We'll talk a little bit about volunteer supervision. You have to think through that and what's appropriate by age. And again, looking at uh, where you are in what generation versus the generation of the volunteer that you're working with. That's going to impact your communication as well as how you evaluate somebody. Remember, if you are 25 and a volunteer manager and you are supervising somebody who's 65, it's going to be a different conversation than when you're 25 and the person you're supervising is a high schooler. They think the high schooler thinks you're really old, which is always a fun aha moment. And at which generation do you need to find that balance of less supervisor and more coach, or more supervisor and less coach? Are you telling them how to do it, or are you helping them find their way in doing the task that you're asking them to do as a volunteer? So let's talk a little bit more about supervising someone of a different generation, what the challenges are. So let's first talk if you are older and you're supervising a younger person. And remember, you could be 65 and the person can be 40. You're still needing to supervise them in the volunteer program. But sometimes that older volunteer and you're younger, you think that they know more than you do, that you have the wisdom, the experience, the empathy. My favorite is when they realize that you as the volunteer manager, you're young enough to be your child, and they're going to remind you that you're the child in this and you can't be talked to. Um, Always breaking that down to who can be the teacher, who's going to learn from who. Technology is always that line that can be, here, let me show you. Um, I always say my daughter thinks I'm stupid about technology, and my mother-in-law thinks I am absolutely brilliant about technology. So it's all from perspective. With older volunteers looking at younger people, they assume that you're just going to be there for the short time. If you're older volunteer, this is the 17th volunteer manager they've had in their time. They know that you're just there for a year, maybe two, and then you'll move on. So think about what you're saying, how you're saying, and what their expectations are. If you're younger and you have an older volunteer, you may say to yourself, oh my goodness, they know more than I do, and you're going to defer to them. and that they are older than your mom, dad, or even grandparents. And to ask yourself, could I even be the teacher? And the answer always is yes. And you may say to yourself, shouldn't they just move on? They should be done. They should go retire and stop being here. They need to move on, and that's where some of the challenges fall. So I recommend that you're looking about um, uh, policies, fairness, stereotypes. Always ask for their ideas. They may think of something totally out of the box and see what their perspectives can bring. And of course, what can you learn from each other to celebrate the other as well as the similarities? And volunteer retention, the very theoretical view of volunteer retention is they're looking to achieve, they're looking for authority, leadership, or they want to be connected. The reality is some really basic stuff. Seeing impact, seeing a smile. Remember, they're getting out of the house or not getting out of the house through the pandemic has made an impact. A simple thank you note, whether written or an email. Great to see you today. It was wonderful seeing, you put out your best work. It was, great. It made an impact on the community that we serve. Um, some people say, those little trinkets. My favorite is uh, Post-its. I'm a big Post-its fan, but ones with your organization's name on it. Is that something that you can give out? Or some people don't want any trinkets. Again, learning about the hot buttons of your volunteers. Volunteers can be retained if they're learning a new skill or even teaching that skill. They could be a great team leader. Maybe they were somebody, we have a CEO of a major hospital, one of our best team leaders in our organization when we need a program and they're out in the field. A lot of people are looking for social interaction, and giving that opportunity is a real plus. And if it's a stepping stone to either some more kinds of volunteering opportunities or even a stepping stone in their professional work. And like I said earlier about being people with the same age is important, or being with people of different ages. It can vary. And when you're doing that volunteer recognition, think generation. There are some free items. Free is always great. Imagine somebody is new in their career. I would love to have to write a letter to their supervisor. You can do this once a year. April is great. It's National Volunteering Month. Just to say thank you. We so appreciate this person giving time on weekends during the day, whatever. But I've seen volunteers' eyes light up when I've offered to write a letter of thank you to their supervisor. Mentioning in the newsletter might be great. Mention at the annual event. If you have a event where everybody comes together, it's always nice to acknowledge. We always give them a table where people can sit together and they sometimes know each other or they'll meet other volunteers. Social media mentions, again, age might be a deciding factor, whether it's something you're going to post on Facebook. Here's our 25th anniversary group, Twitter, this is what you've been doing today, pictures, and of course, tagging, which if you say to somebody of a certain age, they don't know what you're talking about, and others going, oh, that's so old. It varies. Time with the executive director. If you have a bunch of college student volunteers, they may want to sit down with your executive director and have lunch with them or have a brown bag lunch. You bring your own lunch and you can all sit around, talk together. Whereas some other generational groups will have different kinds of conversations, whether you have an executive director or advocacy person or a person who if you're dealing with, let's say, multiple sclerosis, you're going to talk to somebody with multiple sclerosis and they can talk about their experience. Thank you notes, very generational. Handwritten notes are would make, I think, a more senior volunteer just giddy. They don't get very many letters anymore and they would like that, or an email thank you. I'm famous for giving out bouquets of flowers, and that doesn't mean an actual bouquet. That sounds way expensive, but I can send pictures of bouquets of flowers and it's free. It's a way to say thank you. And then there are some direct cost ways to say thank you. The swag idea, backpacks, anything that you're going to buy through a catalog kind of place. Certificates are really great, especially if you're in that high school, college age, maybe beginnings of career. Certificates, not so much at the retiree. Fanny packs. I have never seen something more divisive on what people think about those. It's I find older generation like it because you can carry everything, and college age love them because they're so ironic and funny. So know what your group is, what their hot buttons are, and where to draw the line. Pins might be good for everyone. Plaques, if you're a retiree, you don't know where to put this except, you know, um, firewood in their fireplace or something like that. It changes over a lifetime. So communicating with volunteers of any age, it's our responsibility, two ways communications. Know how they want to hear from you. How often do they want a phone call? Do they want an email? Do they want something in the mail? Do they want it once a month? Do they want it whenever it's timely from your point of view? And should it be email, Facebook, letter? Share information through channels that reach and target their demographic. If you want to reach somebody and you're using Facebook, a younger generation, um, it's just not going to get to them on a timely basis. I can send an email, post on Facebook, and send a text. The text is usually going to get that unless they're of a different age group and what's right for them. Talk to your volunteers, do an annual one-on-one check-in or some kind of evaluation, or here's 5 questions. How do you, what communication vehicle are you using these days? I recommend that you as a volunteer manager pick a thank you holiday to talk to your volunteers as a way to thank them annually. The thank you holiday can be sometime in National Volunteer Week in April, National Volunteer Month. Thanksgiving is the one Volunteer Fairfax uses. If your issue has a particular day, week, month, that could be a good time to use that as a thank you. And remember, your volunteers are your best ambassadors for your program, for the issue, for recruiting new volunteers to make sure that you're counting on them to use their voice or to hear their voice. For your longest serving volunteers, and this is at any age, check in with them as their life changes. This is one of those issues that I have noticed that we struggle with. We have a couple of guys who have been volunteering with us for close to 30 years. As their life changes, I think they don't know how to say thank you. I'm done, and I don't know how to stop volunteering, or to open up that door to see if maybe they started when they were a new professional. Now they are married and have children and can't volunteer the way they have in the past. So checking in with people as their life changes. Let volunteers grow and change. If they've always been the same type of volunteer, but you see them getting itchy or not showing up as often, maybe ask them, is there something that's lacking and they're looking for more? Maybe they've always worked in your food pantry, cleaning the shelves and making things tidy. Maybe they want more interaction with others. Give people the opportunity to lead, to teach new volunteers to come to your orientation. Let them know what their life experience has brought them to volunteering at your organization. And also give your volunteers an opportunity to give feedback on your volunteering program or even on your strategic planning team for your entire organization. And then I always ask and make sure you're communicating, how do volunteers know how to leave? How do you open up the door and let them know if their life has changed, or maybe they just have a different priority, that it's okay to leave, but it's not okay to disappear. Give us 2 weeks notice. Give us any ideas about your task assignments if somebody else needs to fill, and if you need to train another person. But that the worst thing you can do for a volunteer program is to disappear. That hurts in so many ways. So before we start on the scenarios, I'll just stop to see if there's any questions. Sydney?
No questions have come in. A couple things that I've wrote down that really resonated with me. Holy cow, it took you 3 years to become an usher. That blows my mind.
It was great. I love it. I love it. And they're currently not accepting any new ushers because they have so many. Actually, they went from 800 ushers to they were down to 600 during. They lost 200 ushers during the pandemic. People just chose not to return.
Yeah,
So
we think like 18 to 30 hours of training is rough, and it took you 3 years. So that puts that into perspective.
I checked in every year.
Okay, good deal. And then I really liked what you mentioned when you talked about the communication of different volunteer roles is to find that excitement in the opportunity. A lot of us just we kind of have our basic volunteer role descriptions. We've talked in previous webinars that people don't like to hear the word volunteer, so try and come up with something a little fancier. Like for one of our programs for volunteer drivers, we call them waymakers. For people who create playlists for music for residents of nursing homes, they're the music managers.
Right.
So kind of getting that worked in there too. Those were a couple takeaways from me.
Absolutely. And we see this stuff every day and we forget that it's interesting. We may get bored with it. Oh God, yeah, we're doing volunteer orientation. Yeah, we do this every month. And for somebody to make that commitment, they've just made a leap of faith that they have time, a leap of faith that you're the right issue. It's one of the most exciting things they may be doing right now is coming to your orientation, but we forget because it just, it's what we do every day and we may get bored with it. So what I want to do is have a couple actually 5 scenarios. We'll see how we're doing on time. Go through the scenarios and if it's okay, Sydney, the people can open up their microphones and talk or put something in the chat area and just let me know what you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, if I could, if for anyone who wants to unmute themselves, if you look close to the red button that says leave, there should be like a camera button and a microphone. So that's where you can unmute yourself if you're not sure.
Great. This is my chatty part of the webinar. So a group called Recovery Program Solutions supports adults with mental health and substance abuse and homelessness. So their announcement is, we are seeking volunteers to help us increase our media relations efforts via writing press releases, reaching out to reporters, drafting camera-ready stories and artwork, writing stories to be placed in area magazines, pitching stories to the media, growing our media contact list, and more. Learn more about us at, there's an address or a website. So looking at this, does anybody have any ideas how you can make this an effective announcement to recruit college students? Feel free to answer me by voice or put it in the chat box.
I'll kick off the conversation. I just when you read that, I saw the word internship.
Yes. Or let me say, and hey, college students, hey, communications majors, hey, do you need credit? Does your program require an internship? 60 hours available between now and May, letting them, thinking in terms of the college student, what's important to them, can be used for class credit. That's really what they're looking for. Remember, their hot buttons is, I'm required to do this, or I want to do this, I want to have the opportunity. Maybe it's your dream to be in PR and you're reading this and it's like, I get to do this. I'm not even a graduate, but you're going to let me do this. This is awesome. This is great career opportunities, because for that person who does this volunteering effort on their resume, I've already written press releases. I've talked to reporters. I've drafted camera ready story. All these things is like a wow, where we would think, oh, I got to find somebody who's going to do this crap because I don't want to do it anymore. I don't have the time. It's not my expertise. And why can't my communications person do this? Well, we know that if we take care of it ourselves in our own department, it's going to be written as we want it.
We also had a couple other things come in. So instead of seeking volunteers, you could say looking for social media mogul. Um,
Absolutely.
advertise this volunteer opportunity as a social media focus opportunity, and then also use flexible hours could help
Yeah,
attract those students.
right. And in 2022, is it remote work or is it in person? What I love when I work with college students, it can be remote work and they'll work at any hour. If you say, I'm gonna hand this to you at 6 p.m., can you get it to me at 9 a.m.? They'll find a way because they work a different world. So, right. So it's finding those hot buttons, not where our hot buttons are. It's where their hot buttons are and what they're going to get in return. So I recommend look at your blurbs, your statements that you're making in any volunteer recruitment right now, and show it to somebody of a different generation and see what they think of it. You forget things, and we need to be reminded. So, anything else to add? We can move on to scenario number 2. Miriam joined the volunteer corps 6 years ago. In fact, she was the first volunteer you met on your first day at Meals for Every Senior. Miriam's always been a shining star. She streamlined the intake process, edited the new volunteer training materials, and always magically appears when we need an extra set of hands. She really has made a difference at the organization. Miriam took the opportunity of the lengthy pandemic to retire. She is ready to try some new things. She wants to take a break from volunteering at Meals for Every Senior too. But everyone depends on her. So what should you do and how should you do it to help keep her engaged and challenged at your organization?
I think this one hits homes to a lot of us.
Good.
This is a very realistic scenario. I mean, I see her as a mentor almost instead of well, I mean, a mentor is an active volunteer, but guiding the next group of volunteers that are coming in. So she doesn't, it can be virtual, it can be on her own time with those flexible hours, but moving her more into a leadership role potentially. Come on,
And
everybody, use that chat box.
yeah, and the other, sometimes people are saying, I'm, I stayed home for 2 years and I'm going to travel, so I'm not around anymore. Well, you can say if you're back, that first Tuesday in April, we can, that's when we have a training session. It doesn't have to be, will you work every training session? It's, can you work with one? And we'd love to have you. We, want you to, we want to film you to do a piece about what volunteering here has meant to you in your lifetime. So other ways, other opportunities to use her and to be the testimonial for you yourself. The other thing to think about is if there are any lifetime achievement awards or career awards or thank you for senior volunteering, to nominate her. I'm working on several nominations for different programs right now because it's not just about what's happening at your organization, but how can you thank somebody and to go to a higher or different, a broader organization, a community thank you.
Yeah, we had a few other people type in user as type of board member or consultant and make sure that she knows that it's kind of flexible, maybe one-off events. one-time event focus, veteran spokesperson, maybe at a dinner, speaking engagement, public event, and then similar to the board member, an advisory board or an advisory council.
Absolutely. When you go to revise your educational program, your educational materials for your volunteers, she's going to be the best reviewer because she's already done it when she was a volunteer, but she may be an ongoing person. At Volunteer Fairfax, we have an in-office volunteer. That's how we refer to them when we have just 6 people who come in office in the old days before the pandemic, several times during the week. And what I loved is that when I developed this webinar in particular, I brought her in and I said, here's what I'm thinking about. What do you think? Am I saying this the right way? Am I talking about this in what was your hot buttons when you joined? What are you looking for as you continue to volunteer with us? So she became my consultant to develop this program. And then we became friends. Anything else to add on this one, Sydney, or should I switch?
I think that's all for that one.
Okay. So I think this one will hit home because I think this affects so many volunteer managers, was having a difficult conversation. So at the beginning, Evelyn, your volunteer, was very prompt, reliable, volunteering star. You saw her as a possible future team leader and trainer. But during the pandemic, things changed. She was still able to come to the office just 1 day a week, but she arrived late or did not show up at all. She became sullen, tight-lipped, or just unresponsive. She got the bare bones of the volunteer assignments done, but then signed off. You need to talk to her. So my question is, what would you say to the volunteer if she was 20 years older or if she was 20 years younger? I'll give you a moment to think about it.
I'm going to cheat, and I'm hoping everybody else will follow the rules. But I think kind of something that we can touch on for whether older or younger is going back to that role description, those expectations that were sent, and then also having that one-on-one conversation, just asking kind of what's going on. Maybe it's something at home, um, or life's just crazy and chaotic and illness and things they want to keep close to the vest, and then that might change into something about how you communicate with someone who's older or younger than you.
And don't forget, we talked earlier about some volunteers don't know how to leave. The message we give them is, oh, thank you for being here. You've made such a strong impact. We couldn't do this without you. And they hear, this makes such a big impact. They can't do it without me. So I have to keep showing up. And the truth is, the skills or the work that needs to get done, but it's up to us as volunteer managers to make sure the right person is in the right place. So if that's no longer the right person, how do we find somebody else for these responsibilities?
Absolutely. We've had some people chime in saying something like, I've noticed some changes in your enthusiasm. Has anything changed in your life? Clearly something has changed. Is there something that I can do to help?
And
um,
and the change might be, I've come in on Tuesdays from 10 until 1 for 20 years, but I want to take a pottery class and they only offer it on Tuesdays. And how can I? And it's like, well, let's look at the calendar. It can be solved. Or so let's take a break. Um, it's now February 17th. Why don't you take the pottery class and, we'll regroup on July 1st, or we'll regroup on September 1st. If you want to take the summer off, that's fine. You as a volunteer manager just need to plan for somebody else to try these responsibilities, and you can give the person a break. Or if they want to leave, you say, okay, this is how we'll have the wind down conversation. It happens. It's okay.
there was another comment that to do a check-in and ask how things are going. Um, and also have that check-in, how am I doing? Instead of it's, it may not be just the volunteer issue. It could be maybe we're not explaining the role correctly, and that's why they're maybe on the outside looks like they're doing the bare bones, but they may not know that there's a more in-depth way of doing things. So I think it goes back to your communication that you talked
Right.
about, that two-way communication earlier.
You know, changing software could have been something so minor, but something happened to when they're using their software at home and they just are too embarrassed to ask because they're supposed to know these things and they just don't. So, right, it's about communication and check-in and life changes. And like I said earlier, we send the message that they're important and they are, but they're important because we know that they're going to be coming in for this task every Thursday morning or something like that. And things change. I know that we had a volunteer whose parents were getting older and moved to uh, uh, independent living, and it just all these things kept changing, and she just couldn't find the time to come in, and it was fine. And the language I always use: you need to be where you need to be, and you're at the right place at the right time, etc.
We had one last comment come in. I think allowing people to leave gracefully, I love that word, and not making them feel like we're disappointed is really important.
Right. That's where those certificates might help. It can be, if it's the person's last day, I would put, if they're still coming into the office, a sign out, a poster out in the reception area. Today is Julia's last day. After 14 years of volunteering, if you see Julia, please stop by and thank her for all her good service. Or it's Julia Day at my organization, and and have the executive director stop by, or somebody that Julia admires stop by, or one of the clients that she's been working with for 14 years stop by. There's a lot of ways to say thank you without spending money, but to definitely honor that time and put it in the newsletter, at your annual event, mentioned, how much she's given. And if you keep records of how many hours that they have volunteered each year, that's a great way to say, they've volunteered, 876 hours, and at $25.52 an hour, what that has given to our organization. So let's talk about a little bit about welcoming and equity. First in line for gala volunteers. So your annual gala is set for April, and then it's time for the highly anticipated volunteer sign up. The longest serving volunteers, those with 25 years or more of service, always get the first picks. 90% of our 25 plus year club are men over 70 and white. The new professionals in action team are a mix of male and female volunteers, all under the age of 30. All better represent the community we serve, both racially and geographically. So how do we balance between this, motivated new volunteers and the volunteers who have earned this first in line honor? They've talked about it for years. When they finally reached it, they were, made it. And so how do you balance these two different groups and some goals for your organization as well?
This is one I personally had never thought about before.
Yes, this is something rather new because we are looking at things with a equity lens, and we realize, oh my goodness, why do our volunteers don't look like the people we serve? Oh, because we've gone to a practice where with uh, we talk about systemic racism. Here's a system that just shows one kind of person more often rather than the work that we've put in to become more racially diverse.
I think it needs to have a new look for availability of all, because you're younger, age 30, generally speaking, working, families. Not saying that anyone who's older doesn't have a family, maybe working or volunteering, but the seniority thing works for some things, but in terms of signing up for opportunities, you're going to lose quite a bit of your new workforce if a lot of the weekend work is taken up when they're more available. We also had someone chime in, team up veteran volunteers with newer volunteers to work as pairs, giving both equal representation and incorporating a type of event mentoring.
That's the answer that I've always liked when I ask this question, is not make it all or nothing. Give the long-term volunteers their honor, but also let them know that they will be teaching as well, that they have a new role to not only have these key spots, but they're going to be paired with somebody from the new professionals and action team. You can talk about what that group has meant to the organization and how important. They're not there to say nothing and just watch. They're there as equal partners. And it brings in a new level of responsibility for the veteran volunteers.
Yep, way better answer than I gave, and
Nope,
getting a lot of support
in
from other
addition,
people on the webinar.
but I can tell you when I personally started doing some work in 2020, we asked the question, what can volunteer managers do about racism? And I asked that question without knowing the answer. But in my research and discussions with people, and a friend of mine mentioned this, this is what happened at her organization. And they realized that they were not sending the correct message, that their younger volunteer base was quite diverse and really represented many parts of the community, both racially and geographically, and real success, but they were not able to show the rest of the community that they were better than just showing their 20, their 70 and over white male volunteers. And it was a real aha moment for me to realize that as volunteer managers, what can we do about racism? We can help with this kind of thing.
We had another
So
comment come in. It could also introduce the veteran volunteers to someone who's of a different race, geographic location, different background altogether. Absolutely.
yeah, so the when we can start using our volunteer experiences as learning experiences as well, that puts us into a whole new world. So my last scenario, promise, um, let's think about this. In the summer of 2021, that's last summer, Alex, a sophomore environmental studies major at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. They do have a program. I checked that. She interned with a county park. She was a terrific leader and motivator for the invasive weed pull project teams, working mainly with high school and college volunteers. Lucky us, we know that Alex will be back for 2022 and that you've asked Alex to lead the UT class of 1992's Day of Service. It's a great connection, except for the 30-year age difference. What should you do to help prepare Alex for the assignment? And then what should you do to prepare the alumni team to be supervised by somebody much younger? And I know this is probably not as appropriate a volunteer experience example, but I do like when somebody's a college student is being asked to do more and be the leader they want to become, but they're going to be stuck with some generational differences. So I think about preparing both Alex for the assignment as well as the alumni team. So any thoughts on that?
We had a comment come in, sorry, more comments came in. Do an introduction to both and provide background information so they know going in who they'll be working with, kind of a pre-introduction.
Right.
And then could Alex connect with some of the volunteers beforehand to prepare both sides?
Sure, especially with virtual meetings these days. You can just have a 30-minute prep call. We're getting ready for the program to be held on June 27th, and bring your leaders from the alumni group, bring them together so they can help me guide people, teach them a little bit about some of the things that we'll be doing. Absolutely. But I say be proud of the generational difference and embrace the generational difference.
Definitely, and get expectations from Alex and the alumni so they both know what's going to go on that day. I just love that they're all from UT. I'm surprised I didn't get a lot of Go Vols messages in the chat, but
Well,
almost keeping it in the family and everyone. There you go. There's a Go Vols. Um, Almost keeping it in the family and really getting everyone acclimated back, re-engaged into the university, days of service. Alex is leading this, but in 10 years, he or she could come back, or she could come back and um, be part of the day of service, and then she can relate to the new person coming in, the new intern who's going to be the leader, and mentor in that way.
there's a lot of ways to impact through this. It's really pretty cool. So final closing words, communications is key. It's key for any generations. They want to be talked to, they want to be heard, they want to know that they're doing the best that we need them to do for a project. So talking to them. Stereotypes, we've talked about where they can lead you astray and turn you off from things. Have the volunteers not be happy because you're going to say, oh, you don't want to work with technology, do you? You have to find out if they are extremely technologically savvy. You just don't know. And choosing preferences over assumptions. And the only way we know preferences is by talking to people. And know the back to basics in any volunteer program, why people are volunteering and why you're hosting volunteers. Breathe, just take a breath on that thought and realize, oh, right, it does make a difference. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up. Any other question and answers? I do appreciate the opportunity to present on this topic. It really is one of my favorites because hopefully with you, it's opened up your eyes and to think twice what we're saying to people, how we're saying it, and how it impacts your goals, your agenda of being a volunteer leader. Any other questions,
No
Sydney?
questions have come in yet, but thank you so much, Susan, for your time, your expertise, your stories, the scenarios, and letting us participate with you. That was extremely helpful, I know, to me and many who participated. Great information. We got thank yous coming in. So I hope you'll stick around, and I hope everyone else will stick around. I have a couple updates, and then please feel free to type in your questions to Susan as I'm going into my updates.
Okay.
Maybe some things will jog some memories or spark some conversations, I guess I should say. So let me get my stuff going here, and I'll share my screen.
Oh, do I have to do anything or you'll just take it?
I think I'll just take it from you.
Okay.
I'll be greedy like that. All right, let's see. I think everybody can see my screen, right? Ah. All right. So I just have a few updates and reminders to share with the group real quick. So friendly reminder, Susan mentioned this through her presentation, but National Volunteer Appreciation Week, really April is the Volunteer Appreciation Month, April 17th to the 23rd. There's no requirement that you do any kind of event or program for your volunteers, but I strongly, strongly encourage you to do a little something, if not this week in particular, like Susan mentioned, they do their thank you around Thanksgiving. So at least have some kind of time during the year that you share with your volunteers how they're making a difference in your programs. My agency, we're working on our 2022 volunteer impact report. So this report highlights volunteer and program data from the calendar year of 2021. So we're looking January 1st to December 31st, 2021. Last week, I sent out some requests to my coworkers at the state who track a lot of the program data in-house. But I also sent about 125 requests to individual programs. So I got a lot of emails and a lot of communications out there. Um, Before I get into kind of what we're looking for, I do want to let you know if you did not receive a request for data from me, that does not mean that your data is not important. What it means is I'm trying not to make programs who already submit data throughout the year have to do duplicative data. So I'm trying to be nice. I hope it comes off that way. So just kind of as an example, like I didn't send a request to our staff with the State Health Insurance Assistance Program or the SHIP program and our Senior Volunteer Transportation Network because those programs have their own databases and their own reporting systems, and I have the main contact for those programs, so I don't have to, bug you guys for that. But if you have received a request from me or any other program person that you work with, please send us your data by Friday, March 18th. We've got a little bit of over a month left, so hopefully that'll give you some time to kind of pull everything together. We're looking for two main data points, the number of unduplicated volunteers and the number of volunteer activity hours. When I say unduplicated volunteers, don't forget about your board members. A lot of us think, oh, well, they're our management or our advisory councils and they're supposed to be there. As long as you're not paying them, they are volunteers. And I think last year after we talked to some organizations like, oh, I should have included my board members in our 2020 data. So just a friendly reminder to include them in your 2021 stuff. We want to release the report Monday, April 18th. So that's in that National Volunteer Appreciation Week. I'm hoping I can do a thank you video like I did last year and then kind of promote the report. So that gives us about a month to compile everything, format it, and get everything released. We did have a great recommendation from one of our senior center directors. You can see our 2021 report there at that link. There's a lot of black, really dark background, and she asked if we could change that color because it's using a lot of ink, and that's costing quite a bit of money. So that's a great tip. If you look at the report and you see any kind of edits, Susan, if you got time and want to give me some feedback, would love an outsider's, not outsider. You're in the club now, but a perspective from someone who maybe doesn't have the direct relation with our aging network, I guess I should say. We're also using the 2021 report at the Tennessee General Assembly right now during the legislative session. Last year was the first year we've been able to really combine all of our programs in one location. Many of you created your own reports and infographics in the past, and by no means is this report an end to that. We want you to continue to do what you've been doing. In fact, you all inspired me to get everything together, so I thank you for that. And it's just a way that we can show the amazing work being done. And again, I cannot thank you all enough for your encouragement, support, and participation with our impact report. Any questions? Let me know. Happy to answer those. You all know I love continuing education opportunities, so I got a couple of them for you. We talked about this last month, and I'll continue to talk about it until July. But the annual Points of Light conference is coming up July 13th to the 15th at Disney. Wouldn't we all love to go to Disney? Budgets, I don't think many of us are going to be able to attend in person, unfortunately. But thankfully, they do have a virtual option that we can attend. Registration doesn't open until April 1st, so I'll keep you all updated on the cost when it's available. And I've attended these conferences both in person, I believe it was 2018, and then virtual when everything went virtual. And I just found it an amazing avenue for resources. And I encourage you, if it's within your budget possibilities, to attend if at all, if you can. I also found a free training that some of you may be interested in using Volunteer Pro. I've worked with Toby Johnson in the past. She used to be with the SHIP program, I believe in Washington. But it's a great resource for education. And this particular training is all online, self-paced, the art and science of volunteer accountability. It really sounds neat, and I'm finding time in my schedule. Ha ha ha, I know that's so easy to do nowadays. But just looking at the Miracle Mindset worksheet, 5 common myths and mindsets about volunteers, I think that would just be really neat information to learn about. I have the link there so you can register, and again, that's free for anyone who's interested. If you all have any upcoming events or things you'd like me to share with the group, please let me know. I'm trying to kind of put everything in one place so people know kind of where to go for some other educational and update training opportunities. Susan mentioned CVA. She and I are both proud CVA holders. So my last update for you guys is to just talk a little bit about the certification through the Council for Certification on Volunteer Administration. We've talked about this in the past, that there's really not, there is. So I did find a degree in volunteer management, but it's in like Canada, I think, or maybe there's one in another state, but there's very few, like there's no degree. You're not going to get the master's in volunteer engagement or management. So this is an international certification and probably one, if not the only credential for volunteer management and volunteer administrators. So there's only about 1,100 people in the world who have this certification. 13 of us are in Tennessee, and I am very proud to say that we have 3 CVAs in our aging network. And also, as I mentioned, Susan's a proud CVA. I can see her holding up her hands and shaking her head, nodding her head, not shaking her head. I could go into all sorts of details about the exam and applying and what to expect, but I'm going to let the experts do that. And they have 4 education sessions coming up. They're 90 minutes apiece. You can see they're at varied times. So you got after hours, during work, during lunch. If you're interested, I encourage you to sign up for one of those sessions to learn more. There's generally 2 windows to test every year. April's coming up, so I apologize. I should have put this in as a reminder last month. And then we have one in October. The cost is a bit for a budget, so it's $350 to sit. So this is something that you may not be able to sit in at April, but maybe when you get new budgets in June or September, you might be able to factor in some costs. In the past, and I apologize, I have dropped the ball on this, but we usually have 2 study groups, one in the spring and one in the summer for the exam. So I apologize, we didn't do one for the April exam, but we generally meet twice a month, and then closer to the test day, we meet weekly, usually on a Friday morning about 9 o'clock Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. There's a Facebook group, study group. We take their questions, we go over them. We have some lively discussion on those questions and if we like them or not. And we also kind of sit, for those of us who've taken the exam, it took me 2 times to pass it, so it's not an easy exam, though I also have major test anxiety, so that played a factor. But we try and set expectations, kind of help you figure out a mindset to be in, things of that nature. And we're hoping to start this study group back up in July. So if you're interested in not necessarily sitting this year, you don't have to have a committed, I'm going to take this exam in October. If you're like, well, I just kind of want to know what to expect and you want to talk to us 2 Fridays a month about volunteer management, trust me, it's a great way to end the week. Let me know. We'll get you the information and we'll get the study group started again. And then I just want to do one last reminder, last but not least, please join us next month, not only to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, sorry, beer will not be provided, but to talk about fundraising for your volunteer programs. It's an interesting topic. I'm excited to do some research about, a very popular topic from our survey. So I will be presenting that. And if you ever need anything from me, please don't hesitate to reach out. Susan, anything you want to add, especially being a CVA or any of the conferences and trainings that I mentioned?
Sure. No, I, the reason I'm here is that Sydney as a CVA reached out to the CVA community and I thought I can help her. And I'm shocked in a good way. The community, I didn't expect the community to be a part of being a CVA. I thought it was just something you did and then, but I've been really impressed with that part of it. So glad I did it. I didn't know if I could pass a test anymore, a generational thing, but that was also um, uh, that was a big deal. I did the Points of Light conference. I presented in 2020, and it was the first time they did the virtual conference, and it was incredible. And I've actually put in for another session. Let's see if I'm selected. Don't know, but
Oh, I hope so.
we'll see. Put in one about imposter syndrome and volunteer management. We'll see.
Very interesting. I like that. There was a question, is there a cost? Yes, $350 to sit for it. They also have a study guide that you can purchase for, I want to say a little bit less than 100, but you're looking at about 100 to 125 for the textbook. So probably about a budget about $500 for all the works to get the exam certification.
It's not cheap, but you're also going to work for it.
Yeah. And you have a community here and in multiple states that'll help you study for it if you're interested. So please feel free to reach out to me, shoot me an email, let me know if you're interested, and we'll get you hooked up. But with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, if I can remember how to do that, which is not coming to me quickly, unfortunately. But if anyone, I don't see any other questions that have come in. There we go. I think I stopped sharing now. But thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to take yourselves off mute. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So we hope to see you all next month. And thank you all again for being here. And thank you again, Susan, for everything that you've done for us. This was a wonderful presentation.
Glad it helps. Hope it helps. Thanks so much.